when someone comes in and they have all of this confusing and contradictory information. Like, where do you start with someone? How do you know where to start?
Welcome to the show where we help you make smart nutrition simple. If you want proven nutrition strategies to help you build a better body and create the energy to show up for your family without overly restrictive and unrealistic dieting, then you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and enjoy this episode.
What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. I'm your host, as always, Ben Brown, head coach and owner here at Body Systems. We're an online nutrition and fitness coaching company who helps you change the belief system around what it means to be healthy. No more diets, no more dogma, just real food, real exercise, and real results. So today, instead of our regular podcast, I'm excited to share an interview that I did on the Success Flow podcast with my buddies Phil Crawford and Stephen Harris. And in this conversation, I share my personal story, talk about how my struggles with GI issues ignited a passion for clinical nutrition and functional medicine, and how now, after years of study, I've come to realize that achieving health isn't about quick fixes. Instead, it's about treating the body as a whole. It's about understanding the interconnectedness of our body systems. And most importantly, it's about taking ownership over our health journey. So in this conversation, I dive in and I discuss the emotional side of health, how mindset and belief systems and perspective shifts are key to building a positive relationship with food and exercise, and why consistency, patience, and effort absolutely are the cornerstones of creating lasting change. I'll also dive deep into the importance of leading by example and how your health choices can absolutely inspire and do inspire those around you, especially within your family. And then finally, I'll explore the role of coaching and support and why realistic, sustainable approaches are the only way to create long-term success. So, if you're ready to make change, this episode will give you the tools, the mindset, and hopefully the inspiration to take ownership and build the foundation for a healthier, more fulfilling life. So without further ado, let's dive into my interview on the Success Flow podcast. Hope you guys enjoy.
All right, Phil, I cannot be more excited about this episode. We have an incredible guest who I met rucking, of all things, through a friend of the pod, a mutual friend of ours, Casey Strunk. Shout out to Casey there with Strunk HR in Phoenix, Arizona. But Ben and I met on one of his Rise and Ruck Phoenix events, I think 9 months ago, almost a year ago. And we finally got him on the podcast. We have Ben Brown, the owner of Body Systems. He's a head nutritionist and fitness coach, if you will. So a little bit different than what you would think of like a personal trainer. And I can't wait to dive into some of the stuff that he brings to the table for his clients. But Ben Brown is on the podcast, Valley veteran, well-respected in the community. Ben, how you doing? Thanks for hopping on.
I'm awesome, man. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. Excited to chat.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into. You're a family man, and we're going to dive into some personal stories of yours. We're going to dive into some professional stories as well. Kind of kick us off a little bit and give us a little bit of background of where Body Systems started and what you do for your clients that are looking to become healthier.
Yeah, 100%, man. Well, again, thanks for the opportunity. Body Systems started, around 2007, and I'll walk back just a little bit prior to that. Growing up, I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'll use the term athlete loosely, but played sports, super physically active, always interested in being active, being healthy, but in high school, I struggled with a number of different gastrointestinal issues, acid reflux, indigestion, IBS type symptoms. Obviously, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, that was problematic in terms of my social life. It was embarrassing. And being as it that I was interested in health and fitness, I kind of started to digging into literature, especially because of the fact that doctors couldn't really figure out what was going on. Like I did the typical, like go see the doctor. They're like, okay, well try Zantac and try Pepcid and try like the obligatory pharmaceutical drugs of choice. And then it got to the point where like, okay, that stuff clearly wasn't helping. So then they did an endoscopy where they take the small camera, and this is in 96, 97. So I'm dating myself a bit, right? But they put the tube down the throat and try and look at the stomach lining. And they're like, well, we don't know what's going on. The stomach lining's super inflamed, but we don't really have a diagnosis. So good luck, basically. And I was kind of left to fend for myself. And as the years progressed, I went to University of Arizona for college. I ended up playing rugby for University of Arizona. Oh, wow. So I was still physically active, obviously deeply involved in sports. And I was studying physical education. Really is an opportunity just to get out of college as quickly as possible, as easily as possible, right?
Take those electives.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like volleyball and swimming, which was awesome. But I had to get serious at some point. So then I went to Arizona State up here in Phoenix for grad school to study exercise and wellness. And, the stomach, the digestive stuff kind of continued to plague me on and off. Like I had learned how to navigate my nutrition to some degree. I knew, what I could eat, what I should avoid, but I was continuing to study on my own. And then after grad school, I really started to get serious about like, okay, trying to understand clinical nutrition and functional medicine. And this was really the spawn of my coaching business. Was I had studied strength and conditioning and exercise and wellness in grad school. Out of grad school, I started a personal training business, started picking up clients. And a lot of the things that I was adopting for myself, I was starting to implement with my clients. And the overarching principle that I was understanding, especially for myself, was that everything's interconnected. Right? It's like no one body system functions in isolation, right? Our digestive system and our nervous system and our respiratory system and on and on, and our musculoskeletal system. And it's like everything functions together, and we need to treat the whole body, the body as a whole. And so it kind of started to developed a systematic process for how we do that beyond, with my study of functional medicine. I was rooting more into clinical nutrition and just kind of tying everything together to the point where one day I was walking down the street with my sisters, and I was like, hey, what do you guys think about the name Body Systems for a coaching business? And they're like, I love it. And there you have it. Body Systems was born.
Nice.
That's good. I was so excited when Stephen mentioned that you were available today, because we talk a lot about it on this podcast, but we're not experts. So the ability to have someone that has studied this from an academic perspective, but also after doing a deep dive on your content, you're looking at this holistically along with the mind as a complete system, which is huge to have you on today. And I think that you are probably and have figured out some ways to get over the fatigue of people coming to with you as you're diagnosing their problems and their health goals. The amount of information that's out there in regard to health and how to get healthy, calories in, calories out. We all know to eat whole foods and move the body more and get sleep, but it all gets diluted with the amount of messaging. And I just wanted to kind of kick off with your expertise, getting those numbers of questions day in and day out. How do you and your team kind of approach that diagnosis process to help start that conversation around the body and mind and everything as a system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And my approach is very different now than it was years ago. And I think, what I didn't mention, obviously I told you about the root of where Body Systems came from, but I didn't really mention what we do. Obviously we're a nutrition and fitness coaching business, but we're all online. So we're an entirely virtual nutrition and fitness coaching business. And really our whole mission is to help our clients change the belief system around what it means to be healthy and shift the narrative in our mind around exactly what you're talking about, Phil. like the things that we think we need to do to get healthy, to get lean, to get fit, right? What foods do I need to cut out? What food should I eat? Like, what are all, there's so much information out there. And so our objective is to help people really start to think differently about this process. And we do that systematically in terms of first identifying, like, where is someone now? And it's not just a matter of like assessing, like in any business, right? Any type of change that we're trying to create, like we want data, right? And we want to assess the situation to determine, okay, how do we track progress moving forward and establish a baseline? And we very much do that with our coaching business of understanding, okay, like objectively, like we obviously want to know certain parameters, like how much is someone moving? What's going on with their weight? Circumference measurements, like how do they store body fat? How many hours are they sleeping? How much water do they drink? How many calories are they consuming throughout the day, right? What kind of volume are they doing in terms of strength training? So we have these objective metrics so that we can determine, okay, over time, as we start to change some of these variables, how can we determine what sort of progress is being made, right? And that's kind of the most important thing, in addition to subjectively looking at where is someone, like mentally, physically, emotionally, what's their commitment level, what's their readiness for change, right? How much information can they handle? And that's the objective, is really starting to understand the client, develop a relationship, and leverage both the objective and the subjective assessment there to determine what the right path moving forward is going to be and what's going to be appropriate for them, so we can move the needle in the most aggressive yet realistic way possible. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And I love what you're putting down, because it's not one variable, right? So that diagnosis process is super important, and coming from someone who's focusing more on the mind with people that I'm working with. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that I'd love to hear, just to double click a little bit on this, is the emotional aspect, because I know that you talk about freedom. With health comes freedom. And that just landed so heavily with me, because to me, that's the most emotional tie to take action in these areas. And we have these emotional ties that keep us stuck in our patterns for survival or comfort, whatever they may be. It all ties back to an emotional process. So you have to be able to connect with your clients at a much deeper level than just macros and step count. So like, I'd love to hear your thought process there. Double click on that portion.
Yeah. And it's like the question you posed previously, is like, when someone comes in and they have all of this confusing and contradictory information, like, where do you start with someone? How do you know where to start? And as I said, the objective is to help change the belief system. And that's where it's really understanding what they want, what they need, and then figuring out the strategy to help them employ it in a realistic way. And that's where we, have candid conversations around helping them understand this. We call it becoming your own best nutrition detective, right? At the end of the day, like someone has to have autonomy through this process. Like, we're all adults here. Everyone who joins our program, they are a grown adult who can make decisions for themselves and should be able to make decisions for themselves. Yet when it comes to like nutrition and fitness, we want to be treated like a child. It's like, here's your plan, just do it, right? Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And psychologically, emotionally, as humans, we don't respond well, despite the fact that that's what we think we need. Right. And so we have to shift that perspective to help people understand. It's like, no, like, you have to make these decisions for yourself. And I realize that's challenging and uncomfortable for you to have to make a choice of like, do I choose the chicken or the fish or the beef or the pizza or the hamburger or the beer or no beer? It's like, yeah, but when you have autonomy over those decisions, then you own those decisions and you have the responsibility of the outcomes of those decisions. Right? To the degree that when we can empower someone to do that, then it becomes their own journey and us not forcing upon them. And psychologically, we lose that whole barrier and that whole element of restriction of Phil, Stephen, when I tell you guys, you can only eat these foods, right? Or you can't have the cookies or the pizza or the cake or the beer. Psychologically, you're like, no,
yeah, but
that's not going to work. Yeah, but I want it. So it's just going to be a matter of time.
The child kick in.
That's right. No, I'm going to throw a fit at some point, right? And then I'm going to have guilt and shame and regret. Maybe the kid wouldn't, but you would as a grown adult. And so we need to bypass those. And that's where it's like, listen, man, it's your journey. We can do this a lot of different ways. And the really cool part is scientifically, it's really not that hard at the end of the day. Now, of course, psychologically, emotionally, it is challenging to be consistent. But from a physics standpoint, from a physiology standpoint, it's not that hard. So if we can create the environment to help you control for calories, make better decisions more consistently, be more physically active, find intrinsic enjoyment in the process, well, then we're going to build the foundational pillars that are ultimately going to allow you to continue on the journey without us.
And how much does that, like every other aspect in life, the decision-making that you just mentioned, consistency over complexity, flow into every other area of your life? Like, I love the way you just laid that out because it applies to business, relationships, all the above.
Yeah, and that's what's beautiful about the process because it's also so analogous. Like you said to so many other areas, it's right. Listen, because probably all the clients that we all work with, like there's elements of their lives where they're likely very successful, right? In business and finances, or maybe marriage and family, or maybe physical fitness, or maybe all of the above. But the recurring theme is that they have established competence and consistency in one or multiple of those areas, right? And so if you can do it in one, we know you can do it in the other because what does it take? It takes, like we said, consistency, patience, time, effort, prioritization, all of the same things. We just need to figure out how to build it in a way that's going to allow you to do that. And that's where the confidence can come in. It's like a lot of guys we work with, they've mastered all of the areas except for their own health and fitness. But I know if you can do it from a business and a finance standpoint, you've got the ability to do it from a nutrition, lifestyle, physical fitness. We just need to figure out what's going to drive you to be consistent with it.
Yeah, that's the idea of the business athlete, right? Like they're killing it in business, but how do I get that composition or how do I get that healthy focus back to be the athlete that I once was or that I want to be? And I think what you're saying too is, yeah, you can give them all the tools, but it's up to them to make the identity shift and the habit shift. But there's nothing more motivating than seeing the progress in your work. And I think that's where you shine, is you're giving them the ability to see the progress in their work by giving the tools and the systems and all that, where they can plug in the data and then they can see like, oh, each week I'm doing these things and these are the results that I'm getting. You're not doing the work for them. You're not feeding them the meals. You're just giving them the information, coaching them along the way, an accountability partner. And then they can see the progress in that, and it helps them achieve that identity shift. I mean, we all know when you're on a path for change, habit change or whatever, it's going to take a lot of consistency, effort, and you're going to have the times where I want the beer, I want the cookies and all that stuff. And it's like, oh, that's okay. And you're not saying no to those things. But you mentioned it so you host a podcast, Smart Nutrition Made Simple, and you did an FAQs episode, which was awesome. And you mentioned on there, what's your worth itness? Now, I don't know if that's a real word or if that's a Ben Brown word, but you do have to ask yourself, what's the worth itness to my goals? Like what are my goals worth to me? What's it worth itness to me to continue down the path of going out every Friday night if I'm trying to lose some LBs, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's, two really salient things that you hit on. One is leveraging data to make informed decisions. And that's part of helping someone build the autonomy to do that. Is like, listen, dude, it's your journey. Now let's figure out what the KPIs are. that are going to allow you to be informed, right? When we look at your weight on a daily basis, when we look at circumference measurements, when we look at your sleep quality, and maybe even data around sleep quality if we're using a tracker, when we look at your steps, and then subjectively, like we look at things like hunger, energy, cravings, mood, digestion, cognitive function, libido. When you can tap into these things on a daily and a weekly basis, you're continuing to assess and reassess to the degree that then you're in a position of like, okay, I'm seeing some patterns emerge here, whereby, like you said, maybe it's beers on Friday nights with the boys, and every Saturday morning, sleep quality's down, weight is up. Subjectively, I'm feeling like shit. I lose 2 days of productivity. Monday, it takes me 4 days to rebound from a scale weight standpoint. It's like we can look at these patterns and then we can objectively say, all right, is the juice worth the squeeze here? Is this something that I would want to continue to perpetuate, or are my goals more important than playing this, this yo-yo dieting cycle game, and being in this mentality? And so invariably, that's the conversation that we come to with clients at the various points in the journey is, where are the trade-offs, right? Because there's always trade-offs. There's always trade-offs. And you told me when you came in that you wanted to have six-pack abs. Okay, amazing, beautiful. Like, let's do it. But then you're complaining about not being able to go out with the boys on Friday nights. Or maybe you are tired of feeling relegated to preparing all of your meals at home. And we know that eating out too frequently is getting in the way with your caloric control. Or you want to do the extended weekends with the wife, or you feel like you can't enjoy big breakfasts with the kids on the weekends. I respect all of that stuff. However, this is the goal that you said that you want, and these are the actions that are required to get there. So where is the trade-off? Maybe you realize you're perfectly happy at 15% body fat. You look damn good with your shirt off. You just understand that it's not worth all of the sacrifices that would need to be made to get to that 10% body fat.
Absolutely. I think that this ties back to, as Stephen mentioned, the business athlete, something we try to embody. It makes it an archetype that you can kind of think about day in to day out with your decision making. And a light bulb that went on for me, and you mentioned this in the previous podcast, with leading by example. People don't really care to hear about your workout regimen, how often you're doing CrossFit, whatever you're doing. People genuinely don't care. They can tell by your actions. Seriously, like they don't. What they do care about is how you're showing up and the presence you have with the energy that you have. And yes, your physical aesthetic profile carries a presence. And for me, when our chief revenue officer, when we were at our sales kickoff and I got to the gym early, one of the 4 days, he was there. And he always showed up with that presence, and it wasn't just his physical presence. He's actually, I think it was like 5'6", 5'7", but this guy had a presence, and the way he communicated with people had a light bulb go off with me that he's making that sacrifice. He has everything to do from a sales responsibility perspective, but he was in that gym each morning that I was there at 5 a.m. before we started the day. And the only reason I tell that story is just your lead by example is the number one thing. The change starts with us. Casey being a great example of that in the room of men that we're in, how the ripple effect can happen. And I know a couple of people have already reached out to you since that presentation. So I'd love you to expand on, some of those other use cases that you're seeing like Casey and how that leading and actually doing the work ripples throughout the rest of society.
I mean, I just think it's in our DNA. It's primal to respect someone that clearly respects themselves and shows up with not just a confidence, but a physical confidence that can transcend a room. We see this time and again in business, and when you just look at the airport, just look at Costco, like whatever, the people that take care of themselves, and you can deduce how it carries over in other areas of their life. And I don't want to be superficial about this, because we can all agree that there's plenty of very successful, competent, amazing, incredible fathers and husbands and mothers and business owners and leaders that are not in great physical shape. That's fine, but could they be better? If they were, would people respect them more? If they were, would they be a better leader? Possibly, not sure. But I think we can all agree that, it's in all of our best interest to show up as our best self, and that you absolutely will be a better leader, parent, right, spouse, community member by virtue of you prioritizing yourself. And that's just one of the things that I can't speak to enough, especially as it relates to our clientele, especially as it relates to the people that we choose to hang around with. And Phil, it's like you said, when you see someone that's clearly taking and prioritizing, taking extra effort and prioritizing their health, it speaks volumes to their character, right? If someone that busy is able to take the time out of their day to get in a workout, well, then it also negates all of the excuses that we all make, because we all do that. And I think we all can agree at the end of the day that we all have enough time, especially in the social media landscape that we're navigating. We all have the time to get some semblance of physical activity in. It's just a matter of what you can actually commit to and how you can prioritize it. But yeah, I mean, that's just one of those that I can't be bullish enough. I'm bullish about it with my coaches and us showing up and walking the talk, because I see, and I go to conferences with other quote unquote fitness and health professionals. I go to conferences with doctors and other nutritionists and chiropractors and health practitioners, and I see the behaviors and I see how it correlates into their business and the results that they get. And I know and can clearly see that there's a direct correlation between the people that show up, that take care of themselves, that walk the talk, and don't put on this facade of this is what I do during the week when I'm working versus this is how I behave on the weekends. It's this complete integration between
it's their identity.
They're not squeezing it in.
That's right.
They're not squeezing it in. It's a part of the outputs and the effectiveness.
And I think, that's the hardest thing and the most important thing, Stephen, like you said, is how do we shift the identity? Because a lot of times when clients get started with us, they tell themselves, okay, this is what I have to do. I'm going to be the person who tracks my calories, and I'm going to get in the allocated number of workouts, and I'm going to hit my steps, and I'm going to do all these things. And then I go on vacation, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to worry about any of that. I'm on vacation because I want to have fun, right? And I just want to do what I want to do. And then they come back and find it so challenging to start doing those things again. And the conversation ends up being, well, how do we make these things, again, part of who you are? Where do we find and how do we find enjoyment in these things? How do you become the type of person who appreciates the leverage that comes from perhaps tracking your calories or being cognizant of your food choices or not drinking alcohol or making concerted efforts to get up and move every single day or enjoying the strength training process and on and on and on?
Yeah, and I think the hardest thing about that, most people, and I mean, speaking from personal experience, I grew up an athlete, 3-sport kid, and once we started the family and then started the business, and things kind of, go south a little bit. You just stop to think, you're so busy with serving others, right? You're not focused on yourself as much, and you kind of wear yourself thin. You're burnt out as you're building business or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, you have this massive pivotal moment. It's not like an aha moment. Usually something happens in your life that where you're like, oh man, it's a gut check. I need to make some changes. And either you do or you don't. And you start looking at, what does the rest of my life look like? Am I going to stay on this path or this path? Now, what do you say to the people who haven't had that pivotal moment? Maybe they didn't have a health scare yet, but they're in their mid 40s and they haven't gotten to the point where they're like, yeah, but I've been running this well-oiled machine pretty solid for a while now. I already know what I need to do. I just don't have the time to do it. So why would they want somebody like you in their life to coach them and be like, hey, I need to make some changes, but nothing's been wrong. Like they really haven't, it's like they don't have the ability to see that far out 20 years from now, what that could look like if they don't start making the changes now. Right. And so you start thinking about longevity. So what do you say to that person who already says, I know everything, Ben, I just don't have the time to do it.
Yeah. People say, I know what to do, but I'm just not doing it. And my argument against that is if you think you know what to do, but you're not doing it, then you don't actually know what you're supposed to be doing, or what you think you need to be doing actually isn't realistic for you, because the perception is I have to do so many extreme things like, oh, well, I do know that I need to drink less, but I'm just not ready to kind of commit to that. I do know that I need to do this certain amount of exercise, or maybe I need to go join, F45 or Orange Theory. And if I just did that, then, or if I just started running, then I'd be in such better shape. And what I would challenge is kind of like, how are we assessing what good enough even looks like for them? Right. And I think it's the same way that we're looking at a business of like, just getting by isn't good enough. Either you're making progress or you're backsliding. Yeah. Right. We're never just stagnant. And physiologically speaking, what's really important to understand, especially as a middle-aged man and woman, is that actually hits home now harder than ever, in that every single year, like, we are legitimately losing lean muscle tissue if we're not actively doing anything to preserve it. So you might think things are stagnant on the scale, but if you're not actively training or exercising, you're actually losing muscle mass and you're gaining body fat every single year. And so the more metabolically unhealthy we are getting, which, you may not be seeing a big change in blood markers, but you will see that. And it's a challenging situation to be in because we don't necessarily feel that bad. However, that's what's so amazing about the human body is the body physiologically does such a good job of maintaining homeostasis, of keeping us in this kind of quote unquote normal set point, that we don't realize how good we could feel or how bad we feel relative to how we used to feel.
That's the eye-opening experience.
It is. And you just don't realize it to the degree that when you do start to experience, you're like, holy shit, I never realized how good I could feel, how productive I could be, right? What else is possible? If I can feel this good, if I can be this productive, if I can show up like this, how am I showing up for my wife? How am I showing up for my kids? How am I showing up for my business, right? And then coming to that realization. And so I agree with you. Sometimes people do need to learn the hard lessons of like showing up at the doctor and be like, hey man, I'm surprised you haven't had a heart attack yet, because it's bound to happen. And hopefully that never happens.
A perfect example, sorry to cut you off, but a perfect example of that clarity, like, holy shit, what am I capable of? What you do 30 days of no alcohol, and it's like the clearest, most driven mind you've ever had in your, like, you're on fire. Like, you just feel nimble, and you don't even have to be healthy, body wise composition. Your mind is just so clear, and it gets rid of all that brain fog that now you're like, all right, let's go, baby. Like, it's just that little tweak, just that one thing. And there's many different things obviously on your health journey that will do that same thing, but that's one that changes it big time.
I think it is big time. And I think the biggest question that people should be asking themselves around, I don't have anything wrong, therefore I don't know if I'm ready to make, extensive efforts or take concerted efforts towards making change. I also would argue that people that listen to this probably aren't the type of person to live status quo, right? And to be okay just being okay. Yeah. And instead look at, well, despite the fact that, business is going great, they're always thinking, well, what could I be doing better? And I would challenge them to think the same way about all areas of their life. Well, there's nothing wrong with the kids, so therefore I'm doing a good job of parenting. But we all know, like, we probably could be doing a lot better, right? My wife and I don't have any problems, but we probably could have a better relationship. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm not the type of person to be okay just with an okay marriage, just with okay finances, just with an okay physique. And so I think it naturally begs the question of like, well, what more can I do? And when we can have the conversation around, hey, if I told you that it didn't entail as much as you think it does, as much as you think, quote unquote, think you need to be doing, right? Would that excite you more about undertaking the journey? I think every single person would say, oh, now that I realize how seemingly simple it could be as part of undertaking the process, I'd probably be a lot more likely to take action.
So that was a good pivot. You talked about the family. I got to know, what's the Brown household look like? Are your kids' biceps like as big as my head, or, how does life at home when you're so dialed in nutritional?
Yeah, it's funny. I just interviewed my wife on the podcast. So we have over 250 episodes on the podcast. I've been doing it for years. And
Congrats,
this was
awesome.
the first. Thanks. Yeah, you guys know how it is. I mean, it's certainly been an act of love.
Consistency.
And that's right.
It can be a thankless job, but we enjoy it.
Indeed. But I love having these conversations, and it's connecting with guys like you that make it all worth it. So anyways, I had my wife on because my wife's undergone a pretty considerable health transformation, if you will. And it definitely speaks to everything that we're talking about in terms of kind of being the everything to everyone but themselves. And women do this more than men, but I think men really do this in their business, wrap themselves exclusively into their business or maybe their family and then negate themselves. Women certainly do that, but she was the, quintessential mom, corporate employee, head of PTO, like giving everywhere, right, to the detriment of her health. After our son, who's just turned 9, but after he was born, it kind of started to go downhill. And Christina, my wife, is an ex-athlete. She played college volleyball at Cal Poly. So always the picture of physical fitness and health, despite not great eating habits. And so she kind of toggled our entire relationship of wanting to do her own thing. And of course, I keep my mouth shut. I learned that very early on, but I think the point that I'm trying to make here is, despite the fact that I'm psychonutritionist and am pretty regimented, we're just normal people. Like, the kids eat junk food and we have crap in the house and we don't monitor what they necessarily eat when they go to friends' houses, and we all go out and enjoy ice cream and, like, we're just regular people, and it doesn't have to look like super restrictive. I've been there when my daughter, who's now 14, she's 14, when she was born, I was in this phase of my life where I thought I knew everything. I was very dogmatic about nutrition, and the things that I had learned that helped me heal my issues, going back to kind of the body system story, the things that I had learned, I was oppressive with those methodologies with my family. Like, we will not have any of this stuff in the house. She didn't have any sugar until she was 1, which I don't think is a big deal. But the point is, like, it just was very overly restrictive, and it created a lot of stress on the family. And I realized very quickly, working with clients that way, that, remember, we talk about psychological resistance. Well, I lost a lot of clients that way as well. And so I learned, both in my family life, my personal life, in the way that we work with clients, that that's not what it's about. It's about having flexibility and freedom. It's about, again, learning to take ownership over our choices and understanding how our choices impact our health. And so with the kids, it's very much having the conversations around helping them create awareness around what they eat, how it makes them feel, why it's important to eat enough protein, to eat enough fruits and vegetables, how it impacts performance, sleep, digestive health. And so just trying to candidly have those conversations to help them make informed decisions.
Absolutely. And I think everyone can relate with the household, and it might be fluctuating. You go through phases, and you want everyone to be on the ride and as enthusiastic as you are. And your family and your partner, your environment that we talk about in this podcast all the time, has such an impact on those choices. And if it's the person that you're living with, I know for us in our household, we do have to do our own things every now and then, because I will go hard on a kick that I'm super regimented with, and Paula will as well. And it's been a slow learning process. Like, my biggest thing recently is, have you eaten protein? Have you drinking water? And I keep having to, and it clicked with her. And again, this is not me being an expert, just sharing what is being impactful for me. And she's like, wow, I feel a lot better. And it's like, it only took 6 or 7 months. And then she'll come up with something that she's cooking, or some juicing that she's doing. I'm like, wow, this is great. And if you're communicating on it and sharing, but also respecting the other person's journey, the household's just going to be better as well. But that environment's such a key factor that we talk about all the time.
The best thing you can do is just lead by example. And that's why, that's what we talked about. That's what I try and do. Because you can tell the kids anything you want. You can tell your significant other anything that you think is right. But if you're not putting it on display, forget about it. And
that's 100% true. 100%.
I don't know. I think we all want to know the best things to do for our kids, and we want them to make good decisions. But if we're not making good decisions for ourselves, then you can forget about it. And it's funny, we're sponsors for the kids' middle school in town here. And so we had a booth set up the other day, and I was doing a free assessment. Like, if you scan the QR code, you fill out the form, and I'll audit I'll audit kind of the questionnaire and send you feedback. And one of the moms came up, and I don't think this is what she wanted to hear, but she said, is this an assessment for the kids? I said, no, this is for the adults. She said, well, how do I get the kids to eat healthy? I was like, it's trickle down. So it all starts with you. And she kind of was like taken aback a little bit, because it was a hard look in the mirror of acknowledging. And legitimately, parents are like, how do I get my kid to do this? You don't get kid to do anything other than just show them how to do it. They're watching you.
Yeah. I mean, if you're sitting on the couch watching, brainless activity with a beer in your hand and going out back for a cigarette or whatever, and you're telling your kids to go outside and, play basketball or whatever, they're not going anywhere. They're playing video games. They're doing exactly what you're doing, brainless activity. And so that's totally true. And I've noticed that. I've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. I became on my own health journey in the last 18, 24 months, and going to the gym consistently, or just getting out of the house consistently, especially with the rucks that we've been doing over last year. I now have a weight vest, 40-pound weight vest, take the dog on for a 2-mile walk in the early mornings when it's not so hot in the summer. But I leave the house, and even if they're not up, they'll see me come home. They're like, oh, did you just do another walk or another ruck, or did you just go to the gym? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I did. So my son now, like last night, he's like, Dad, let's go walk the dog. He's like wanting to get out and go do it. So like, all right, I'll throw my 40-pound weight vest on. And they're just not. That shift for sure is 100% true. When you do it for yourself, it'll trickle down to your kids. And I think that's spot on advice. Now, I did phone a friend, Ben. I reached out to Casey, and I said, Casey, what's a question I can ask Ben? He's coming on the podcast. So this is a Casey question. I don't think it's specifically for him. But for the listeners, just because this is a Success Flow podcast, what is the biggest difference between people who fail or succeed as clients? Not necessarily for themselves or whatever, but if they're working with you, why would they fail or succeed? What you kind of hit it out throughout the podcast and whatnot, but just again, reiterate, what's the biggest difference between those that fail or succeed at their health goals?
The people that succeed are willing to continue to show up despite the challenges that they experience, because you're gonna face a lot of challenges along the way. And the people that let that deter them to say, oh, it's just not working for me. They're not the right plan for me. It's not the right time. I can't afford it, blah, blah, blah. Something came up, too much, right? All of the excuses, it's not the plan. It's the fact that you're just not giving it enough time, energy, effort,
Just not putting in the work.
commitment, consistency, putting in the work. And so, yes, it's the people that consistently show up and do the work. And in our case, that are willing to submit their check-ins consistently, right? It's like some of these little things, the people that are willing to and can justify, like perhaps tracking their calories for a period of time. The people that are scheduling and getting on their coaching calls, right? Despite the fact that maybe nothing went right over the course of the week, but they're willing to, my wife calls it, and I think you guys will appreciate this. She calls it film review. Listen, it's our opportunity every single week to look at, especially with our check-ins, to just review our performance over the course of the week. Otherwise, how are you going to get better? So we have to have the athlete mentality there. Your guys' word, what did you say? The business athlete?
Business athlete, yeah.
Yeah, and so the business athlete is all athletes have coaches, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important point for your listeners and certainly for our clientele, is acknowledging if we're high performers and if we want to be high performers, then it's reasonable to assume that we should probably have a coach who's been there, done that, and knows how to get you from point A to point B to point Z, right? It's going to help save us time and energy and effort and probably money because they've climbed the mountain before. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to take the same path that they've taken. We'll probably be on our own path, but they're the Sherpa, they're the co-pilot that's going to help get us there safely, right? And so I think that it's really important for people to acknowledge that, of like, we're not going to be able to do this for you, though. You still got to show up. You got to show up early. You got to do the work. You got to put in the reps, all of the analogies. You got to have enough time under the bar, blah, 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 blah. Well, you get it. But legitimately, that's it. And there's nothing to say that this is going to happen in 3 months or 6 months or even a year. How many years have you spent contributing to the current situation that you're in? Right? To think that we're going to unwind and unravel all of that stuff, which, by the way, has a lot to do with childhood development, how hard our parents were on us, childhood trauma, blah, all that kind of stuff, right? We won't get into that. But to unravel these patterns and the psychologies associated goes far beyond your calories and your macros and your strength training plan. However, right, if you're willing to commit to those things consistently in a way that works for you, I guarantee you'll get there, right? But you got to continue on the path. You got to keep taking one foot, putting one foot in front of the next. And that's the difference maker right there. You guys know how it is too. Like, so many people are on the precipice, right, of ascending the mountain, and then they decide to go back.
Yeah,
you just got to keep going.
Yeah,
they're so close, and as coaches, we can see it and we can feel it, and we want it so badly for them, but they just don't want it bad enough for themselves. And I think that's true in so many different areas of our life, certainly business. And so it's just keep going,
There has been so many value bombs on here, what we call bamboo bangers, to keep it on theme. And I have a ton more, but we're running up close to time. And we have a kind of bookend question that we ask all of our guests. And it is, what is the definition of success to Ben Brown, in your words?
Yeah, that's a good question. The definition of success is, in my mind, it's really having the flexibility and freedom to do what you want to do on a daily basis, to be physically able to do that, to be financially able to do that, to have the support that you need to do whatever it is that you want to do. That, in my mind, is ultimate success.
That's a great response. Ben, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun, and congrats to you again, 250 plus episodes on your own podcast. I think we're at little over a year and coming up on 18 months. And we definitely know what that's like to be able to put out that many episodes, at least in our world, and to go and do what triple or quadruple what we've done so far. Consistency, putting in the work, you epitomize that. Thank you again for jumping on. Lots of great nuggets. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, we'll throw it in the show notes. Where can they find you? What's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is bodysystems.com. We've got a number of free resources on the website. So once they jump on, just click on the resources button at the top, and high protein recipe guide, fat loss fix guide. We've got our metabolic and what we call body systems assessment review. So you can, I'd be happy to audit that for you. And then we've got our Smart Nutrition Made Simple show on iTunes and Spotify and everywhere, where podcasts are heard. And then on Instagram at Body Systems Coaching.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you so much. Thanks so much.
We'll be at you next week.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this content valuable, here are 4 ways I can help you in your nutrition journey for free. 1, grab a free copy of my Fat Loss Fix Guide at fatlossfixguide.com. 2, join my free group at smartnutritionmadesimple.com. 3, subscribe to my YouTube channel at smartnutritionmadesimpletv.com. 4, leave a 5-star rating and positive review so that we can gain access to more nutrition experts ready to share their knowledge with you and ultimately help more people make smart nutrition simple.